You join me today at the wheel of something incredibly special. This car has quite a well-known owner. It belongs to Princess Diana, Lady Diana Spencer. It was her second car. Wow! Hello, welcome to Furious Driving. Now, over the last few weeks, I've brought you some fairly well-known celebrity Fords belonging to pretty well-known people. We've had Derek Trotter's Mark III Capri, we've had Terry McCann's Capri as well. But who is more famous and drove a Ford than either of those two? Well, how about Princess Diana? She's quite well known, I think. Now, you may have seen this Escort in the news recently because it is going up for auction. And so now we've got a chance, before it sells, to have a quick look around Princess Diana's second car. So, as if this was an episode of The Crown all of a sudden, here's a bit of royal history for you. Prince Charles proposed to Diana in early 1981, just 6 months after they started going out, in fact. Now, if you have actually been watching the actual Crown, then you'll know she drove an Austin Metro, an early 1980 car, which the Crown got the wrong version of because the headlamp bezels were incorrect. So this was actually quite a significant upgrade on that Metro. Now, you may be thinking that a Ford Escort is really quite low market, quite below a future Queen of England, as she would have been, being the future bride of Charles. But this is a Ghia. This is as good as an Escort got. And in fact, it was quite a canny choice because not only was it the luxury item, and we'll look at some of those luxuries in a second, it also showed her to be a princess of the people, the people's princess, as the Daily Mail and the Express and those kind of people like to say quite a lot. Because driving a Ford meant she was one of us, she was normal. But driving a Ghia showed she was posh. Now, starting here at the front, not only do we get these luscious Ghia badges on either side of the car, we have beauty rings and dog dish hubcaps beautifying these steel wheels. Being a 1981 car, we still have the wraparound plastic-ended metal bumpers, but this is a Ghia, so we do get a little bit of metal trim all the way around the lights and the bonnet, marking it out as something a little bit special. Now, when this car was new, this is the correct number plate. The original license number is the same, but this was on metal plates when the car was new from the factory. But on the bonnet is one of the most significant things about this car that marks it out as her car. Now, our little amphibian friend here was actually a present from Lady Diana Spencer's sister, Lady Sarah Spencer, and it was meant to represent the fairy tale romance, the kissing a frog, finding a prince kind of illusion of a story here. Just think, if you kiss an Escort, you might find a Granada. Now, this isn't the original frog. That actually left this car when she moved on to her next car in 1982. She got another silver Escort, as far as I'm aware, which then changed into a convertible XR3, which SO14 decided was a little bit too obvious and perhaps dangerous and a bit of a security risk. So this car now has a reproduction bonnet mascot, an identical one to the original though. So, climbing aboard the Escort, we notice a few little extra details. You may remember we did a basic Escort Mark III a little while ago. It didn't have such nice velour-y door cards. It didn't have wood in the door either. It did have wind-up windows, same as this though, and it certainly though didn't have velour all the way into the door pockets, which is far posher than your average proletarian gets. There are internally adjustable mirrors on the doors, which are nice, and turning to the seats themselves, we have matching the door cards, this same ridged velour and soft blue velour, very comfortable indeed, complete with headrests no less. This is something the base model Mark IIIs did not get. This shape of car arrived in 1980, it was facelifted in 1983. This is the middle of the run, but this is full of all the toys. We have got the standard Ford switchgear, the spindly tiny switchgear, indicators and horn on the left. Okay, wipers and lights on the right. Now, looking at the dials in between this kind of rubbery, squishy steering wheel, very squishy in fact, there are the instruments. Speedometer on the right hand side, optimistically reaching 140 miles an hour. Swishing past the warning lights and gauges, we have a rev counter, which is something the basic models do not get. Clock or blanking panel, definitely not an actual rev counter. Now, here in the centre, in common with the lesser models, we do have a speaker grille, but this being the Ghia, we do actually have speakers down here in the footwells, so this is kind of posh. Now, we're not quite sure if this is the original radio or not, as it's missing a little bit of trim around the edge and the buttons, but it is a Ford stereo of the correct period. You'll notice it's the side entry cassette deck rather than an end-on entry, as is more common. Underneath that, we've got big ash Got a big ashtray, which looks like it's never been used. A couple of little cubby holes because Fords are practical. Then we have a 4-speed manual gearbox. Now you might be thinking, a princess driving a manual gearbox? Well, don't forget she was very young, and young people in the early 80s drove manual cars. Also, people who are so young and sporty and enthusiastic would have wanted to drive a manual, not an automatic. The automatic wasn't actually available for a little while longer in the Mark III Escort. Up top we do have the prime tea shelf of all Mark III Escorts. This is divided, so this is an afternoon tea shelf because posh. So we've got our cucumber sandwiches with the crusts cut off, we have scones, we have cakes, and even a small area for tea with a straw. Up above, again, because we are in the top model, we've got a tilt slide sunroof, which we can use, which I won't because I never trust old sunroofs. And in front of that winder we have got the digital clock, the height of sophistication in the early 80s. And just hidden behind the wheel we do have controls for the rear wiper, because being a Ghia, not only do we have a heated rear window, rear washers and rear wiper. Man, this is the good life. Now looking in the back of the car, it is standard Mark III Escort size, however we do still have all the luxury trimmings of the Ghia. We've got a bit of wood in the top of the door, we've got the nice velour strippy bits, we've got the nice velour-y door cards further down, and the seats are also nice and furry and velour. You'll notice though there are no rear seat belts because this is the early 80s, 1981, safety not a consideration really given in that respect. Also, no rear headrests, only here in the front, but they are velour backed though. What you will find here in the back though is a second courtesy light and rear speakers. These are hexagonal JVCs, so I'm assuming they're not original from the factory, but I more or less guarantee that. Did Princess Diana herself climb in the back of this car and cut a hole in the parcel shelf with a Stanley knife and wire in these JVCs? That would be quite exciting to have seen. In typical Mark III Escort style, headroom is adequate, knee room is a little tight, it's generally quite comfortable. Now, as it's a Mark III Escort and every Ford of this era, if you want to open the bonnet, you pull the steering brake adjustment lever. So if you are the future King of England and you're buying your betrothed a Ford, which motor do you offer her under the bonnet? Well, it has to be the 1.6, doesn't it? The top of the tree, fuel injected with 104 horsepower. Now, not only was this relatively sprightly for the day at 11 seconds to 60 and 104 miles an hour, it was also reasonably frugal at just over 30 mpg as well, so it's a win-win on all counts. A car a princess should be proud of. We do have the Ghia badging on the back end, pointing out it is a 1.6, but it is showing its age as a 40-year-old car, as this rear bumper does need a little bit of paint now, but overall the condition is actually pretty good. So this car is going to be going up for sale again in just a few days' time on the 29th of June through Riemann Danzy Auctioneers. If you're interested, have a look at the website and you'll see if you can take it for a drive like I'm about to. Wow, I am sitting in the driver's seat of a car that was once driven by Princess Diana, Lady Diana Spencer herself. Now, I've owned Escorts myself, but none of them were quite like this one. I had a Mark IV Ghia, but the Mark IIIs were pretty horrible. No bits of timber in them. Now, this car apparently was built specifically to order in Cologne in Germany. There's a letter the auction house has from the guy who apparently built it. The story goes, after she had this car, she had another one virtually the same. Then she went and got a bit snazzier. She got herself an Escort convertible, a red one no less. But her close protection people felt that that was a little bit obvious. Everyone could see it was her. There was no hard top for protection. It was just too vulnerable and too obvious. So they wanted her to change to something more discreet, but she obviously wanted something a bit powerful. So after her protection people in SO14 had a chat with Ford's PR people, they suggested that they do her an Escort RS, but not just a regular Escort RS, because you couldn't order that in black, only in white at the time. They suggested they paint her an RS Turbo black. They felt that was a good idea because it was nice and discreet. It wouldn't draw attention and it would blend in and be easy to lose in a crowd. So they built 3 of them, one for Diana, one as a decoy, and one apparently as a spare for another unnamed member of the royal family. Now after that, She moved on to bigger, better things, a Jaguar XJ for example, and then on to Germans. The Audi 80 convertible from after she was divorced, which recently sold for £58,000. This car incidentally is expected to sell for somewhere around 30 to 40,000. Now after she gave up the car in 1982, I believe it was, it went through various owners and finally wound up being given away as a newspaper prize in 1988 by the Daily Mail. Then it was bought by a father for his daughter to use. And they owned it and she was driving it at the time that Diana was tragically killed. At that point the daughter decided she didn't really want to be driving the car anymore. And so it was sold again to another father for his daughter, but apparently it was barely used, if used at all. And so it's been in storage for around 20 years now, if not longer. And now it's finally being sold, and that's your chance to own a piece of motoring history, really. Now this drives exactly like every Ford Escort I've ever driven. The steering is heavy, the brakes are okay but a little woolly, the gear change is kind of rubbery and notchy. I don't want to do any emergency stops or fast corners because those tyres, we're trying to work out the date on them, but they're not new, put it that way. But typical of an old Ford, it all hangs together and it drives quite reasonably. Well, thank you for joining me today at the wheel of this incredible piece of motoring history. If you like royal history, this is for you. If you like car history, this is also for you. What a crossover. I hope you've enjoyed this. If you have, as always, please do hit like and subscribe and join me again next time driving something completely different.